Good afternoon, good evening, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Adoption Dialogue, the program about all things adoption, the joys, the challenges, and the many complexities. My name is Judith Alexis Craig, and I'm one of your co-hosts. I'm an adopted person who was born in Haiti and adopted into a predominantly white family. I've experienced transracial adoption, transnational adoption, and being a foundling. I'm now a mother myself of both biological and non-biological children. I'm a therapist and social worker and support families and those individuals who are experiencing the complexities of adoption.
And I'm Sally Bafo. I'm an adoptive parent. I started off as an interior architect, worked for quite a while loved it actually, and then decided I had to adopt because I couldn't have children and chose to adopt actually. And at that point, I decided to become a parent at home, gave up my work, got a job that enabled me to help, part-time job to be at home for the children, and eventually became an adopted consultant. So here I am. And today, Judith and I, who met somewhere along the line, came together to start this program because she's a foundling and I'm an adopted parent, extreme ends of the spectrum. And so we get a range of people that we interview, and both of us learn so much from them. I mean, Judith is an expert in her field, and I've done quite a bit of work in it, and yet we always learn something new on this program, every time. And today we're going to learn something even more unique because for the first time, most unusual, we're actually interviewing the sister, the transracial sister of Judith. It's not often that you have any of first of all, the adopted children being interviewed. Adults, they usually interview the children, but adults being interviewed, but also to have the white sister of a transracial adopted black daughter being interviewed. So we have Katherine here, Judith's older sister, and she's going to tell us about the impact that having a sister brought into a house that she already lived in as a birth child impacted on her life and the journey onwards. So I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome Katherine. Katherine, it's lovely to meet you. It really is.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Katherine, tell us first and foremost, how old were you when Judith joined your family?
I was 3 years old, and I remember it was very cold. We lived in Quebec, and Judith came in a pink snowsuit, like the baby bunting without the legs, And I actually have a lot of memories from that age. I find some people remember nothing, and some people remember lots, and I'm just one of those people who remember a lot.
It's amazing. I'm surprised you remember that much. And what was the impression? Do you remember what your impression was, or you were too young to know that?
To be honest, I think it might have been triggered in later years. We found, I was going to say a video, but Judith, what would have been called? The old movies.
The video reel.
Video reels. My dad found one, and the government of Ontario, at that very moment that Judith came, had been making an adoption documentary, and we didn't know this, but someone found it, or he found it in the library and was like, well, let's watch this. And we turn it on, and there in the living room is Judith being given to my mom and dad.
This is just...
It was actually by
serendipity.
It was actually by the National Film Board of Canada, and they actually had followed us and been filming us since we were in Haiti. And so they followed us on the journey from Haiti. Myself, there were about 20 other children who were being adopted at the same time, and all being taken to the province of Quebec, where Katherine and our parents lived. So they followed us from Haiti. And it's interesting because in Haiti, I'm wearing a little pink dress, which I still have to this day.
Wow.
And then on the plane ride as we're nearing Canada, as Katherine said, they put all of us in these warm, big jackets because the day we arrived, it was like negative 30, 35. It was like one of the coldest days.
And you're coming from a very warm climate as well.
Yeah. So talk about culture shock immediately.
Mm-hmm. Well, I always thought, I don't know if I had really thought about it until I saw that video, and it was like, oh, I remember this, and then there's me with my little pigtails, 3 years old. But it was so amazing that we actually caught the moment where we saw her for the first time. But the moment I remember is later when we were home and she had fallen asleep in the car, and my parents brought her in and put her on, there was like a perfect shelf for diaper changing table height. She was 3 months old, and they must have lifted me up. And as they unzipped it, she opened her eyes.
Oh, she was sleeping at the time.
That. Oh, she was sleeping, but she opened her eyes and saw us. I remember that moment she first saw us. And I truly believe that is one of the reasons why I wanted to adopt for my whole life, because it just made such an indelible impression on me.
What did you see in her eyes at that time? What did you see when she opened her eyes? What do you think you saw there?
Wonder. Because it was just like,
where am I?
Yeah. And I don't recall seeing fear, but I'm sure there was, you know, anxiety because everything was new. I'm sure there was grief going on. There was fear, anxiety, all those things. But I just feel like that's the moment we bonded.
You know, and can you imagine what that is? Because Judith, being a foundling, would have gone through that kind of experience a few times. First of all, being taken from that place, taken to the hospital, there'll be wonder there, what's happening here? Then taken to the orphanage, there'll be wonder here, what's happening there? So in her little world, as a young baby, should have been through quite a few of that. I can just imagine that. Wouldn't you? Judith, I mean, of course, you wouldn't remember any of this, baby. You're a baby, thankfully.
But she didn't cry. She was
didn't
just
cry.
like taking everything in. She didn't
Wow.
cry. No.
Amazing. And so after that, did you kind of feel protective over her in a way, seeing her in that kind of way?
Definitely. I mean, it was a process. I was only
Yes.
3, and my mom, actually, I had severe allergies. So my mom was still nursing me because there were very limited foods that I could eat, and she wanted me to get as much nutrition as possible. So my mom was pretty amazing in a lot of ways. She's one of the probably few white women who adopted Black children who learned how to cornrow hair. And also she nursed Judith to the best of her ability when Judith came, because she had read a lot from, I believe it's Bowlby, who did research on bonding and attachment. And I think some of his stuff is considered obsolete now, but it's what was there at the time. And my mom decided that, well, if I can nurse this child and try to have an attachment with her, I'm going to do it. So I remember standing there with like, what's going on?
Yeah, because your mother was breastfeeding her.
She had to supplement as well, but she was able to do it for a while because she still had her milk, because I had, you know, so I very much felt unseated. I remember that, but it is what it is. Every oldest child has to go through that number of times.
Because you were the only child at the time. And because you had the allergies, they would have fussed over you quite a bit, you know, and suddenly a baby comes along, you know, and the baby's taking a lot of attention away from you. It can't be that easy at all, can it? But
No.
then can you describe how your relationship with Judith developed sort of over time from, I mean, that was a baby, but as time like went to primary school and so on and so forth?
I feel like we were each other's ride or die. We were always there for each other. We shared, I think, a lot. I mean, in later years, I realized adoption type things and racial type things we didn't talk about too much, because I think, at least I was largely unaware. But as far as like sisterhood goes, we shared everything. And definitely I remember a few times in the playground being absolutely outraged when somebody told me that she wasn't my sister. Excuse me, she is my sister. I was definitely, if there was an opportunity, I remember the feeling. I don't remember specific instances, but there was definitely that feeling of, you know what, God, because that's my sister.
Yeah, Katherine was definitely very protective. I remember playing outside when we were little and people coming up and saying that, like asking, because we lived in predominantly white neighborhoods when we were quite young. And it was, who's that? Why is this Black girl playing with this white girl on the front lawn? And it would be like, I actually do remember her saying, like, that's my sister kind of thing. So I appreciate that, because I was really shy when I was little as well.
Yes.
And very self-conscious and I was very aware of being different. And so I think it really helped me when I didn't have a voice for myself, that at least she could, you know, she was there to speak up for me and to support me.
So I think in that moment you felt like you were being claimed.
Yes. Yeah. I think
when she was going
it was important to feel that.
Yeah.
The interesting one interesting thing I found was that Judith was very quiet and very shy through childhood. Like, I was the loud one. And
still are.
Oh, well, we'd have to have a sound meter in the room when the whole family was there. But the funny thing is that as she went through her university years and grew into her own, she became much more outspoken and was able to become her true self. And we are more alike, I would say, than any of our siblings. Judith and I have more of a similar personality than any of them. So it's funny, because it's like we always connected, but it was like she was holding back because, I mean, of all the trauma, I was assuming all the trauma she had been through, you know, she was just like, stay quiet, stay out of, you know. But I remember one of the funnest things I always remember is we always had bunk beds, and I was the oldest, so I got the top bunk, and I would put my arm down all the time, and she would put her hand up, and we would try, okay, let's see if we can fall asleep like this.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh, that's beautiful.
So one memory that I'm always fond of is we had bunk beds. There was three of us girls in a bedroom, and I was the oldest, so I got the top, and then we would almost every night I would put my arm down, and she would put her arm up, and we'd try to like configure our fingers so that we wanted to wake up in the morning and still be holding hands. Never mind the fact that Judith would have no blood left in her fingers at that point. But we always thought that would be the coolest thing. It was, we never quite accomplished it, but it was fun.
That's beautiful. That is so lovely. So, Katherine, when did you realize along the way that she was a different color from you and that it was significant?
I mean, there must have been something because we lived in the States for a while and we lived in Ohio. And I know my mom has talked about, there was always a comment. Oh, do you have a daycare? You know, and people would always ask, you know, oh, well, are you babysitting? And she's like, no, this is my child. And it was very much that present when we lived in Ohio. So I think that I must have had a sense that at that point I was going to kindergarten and I must have had some kind of sense. And, you know, I'm sure kids would have started saying things by that point.
Yeah.
But I mean, it never really bothered me. My mom was pretty proactive in talking to us about what adoption is and how we are a family, just like any other family. And I know that there are some good and bad sides to all that conversation, but her intent, I think, was to just allow us to be fully bonded and not to care what other people thought.
That's interesting. That would have been a very difficult thing because then, first of all, you're going to have to be conscious of racial biases along the way from outsiders. But within your family, did you learn about racial biases that you might have unconsciously, which you didn't realize, which may have, you know how we talked about we'll come back to that when we talked about doing things deliberately.
Yes, we definitely did not learn about that. It wasn't very much on people's radar, I would say, in that time and space. Not to give excuses, but it wasn't something that people talked about much or maybe weren't aware of, you know, and we definitely didn't have those conversations.
Okay, so you just bobbed along. You bobbed along, yeah.
We did.
That's interesting. Yeah, as you would, you know. And Judith, what about you? Obviously, you were very much aware of it. When did you become aware of it consciously, Judith?
I became aware of it consciously actually at a really, really young age. I remember being probably in the region of 2. So our parents had another biological child, not even 2 years after I came. It would have been like maybe 20 months after I arrived, because she and I are just 2 years apart. So when she was born, it was, as Katherine said, you know, another child comes along, the other children who are already there, there's always going to be some attention taken away. But for me, it was definitely deeper because, as I said, we lived in a very white side of town. We were in the States at this time. And I was this little Black girl now in between these 2 white girls who were fawned over and seen as beautiful. I never got those kinds of comments except from my parents, right? So I became aware of it at a very, very young age. And I used to want to look and fit in with everybody else in my family. So I used to scratch at my skin and actually tell my mom I wanted this Black stuff to go away. I wanted to be white. I wanted a long pointy nose. I wanted the long hair. So I had a lot of deep identity challenges from very, very young.
I was just curious on the timeline because I think Mom always said it was around 8 years old or 7 years old when you were scratching your skin and saying you're going to scratch the Black off. But I didn't think it was as young as 2.
Yeah, it was young because it was when we were in the States, and that was I was 4.5-ish.
4.5,
right? Because Sarah was born there, but then we moved back to Canada a few years after Sarah was born, I think, or shortly after Sarah was born, because we moved back, 2 years, so a few years after Sarah was born. I think of timelines, going back a few years, we moved back to the States. But there it was very intensified because our whole community was white. My best friends were white, so I really was surrounded by whiteness from such a young age.
I also recall Mom saying that in Sunday school, there was a particular teacher that she didn't trust with you. And so she knew that there was one person that she trusted there. And if she could hand you off to that person, she'd be like, okay, I can go into the service now. But if that person wasn't there, she would either stay or not leave you in Sunday school. So it's quite possible some of those things started, you know, from that experience.
Yeah, that was very sensitive of your mom, Katherine. And Judith, were you aware of those kind of things? Or there were so many of it that it was just become like a blur?
It happened within our own family, right? Like our maternal grandparents were going to disown our mother because when they found out that she was going to adopt a Black child, they were ready to disown her. So I felt that energy. I don't think I was actually there for that conversation, but really from as early as I can remember, I was always treated differently than my sisters. And then later my parents had adopted again from Haiti and had another biological child as well. So I know from myself, I remember being probably as young as 5 or 6, sitting on the stairs when we moved back to Toronto. And our grandparents eventually came around. They would come and visit us. but there was always differential treatment. So my sisters would get more money, when they're giving out little bits of money or better dolls or better toys. So
Did we
I was
actually get
very
more
aware of
money?
it. Yeah,
Did we actually
because
get more money?
because what mom would do is she would then divide it up evenly so that none of us, but I remember sitting there hearing, I'm sure I snuck downstairs hearing adult conversation.
Mhm.
I remember very clearly about instances where you could hear the displeasure, I'll put it that way. And, their own issues of prejudice and racism definitely existed. So yeah, I was aware of it from a very, very young age. And it stayed throughout my life, right up until our grandmother passed away.
So that would have been when you were quite old then.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
means it's interesting how some people just don't change. Maybe some people have difficulty changing. That's what it is, wouldn't you say?
Definitely. And I think for them, there were some shifts. There were times when they would take us, for weekends, and we get to go to like Marineland and go to like on little outings, and we go to our uncle owns an opera company and a ballet company. So they would take us to shows. So I did experience some of the benefits of being their grandchild. However, they inherently at their core didn't change enough.
Were you aware of this, Catherine? Were you aware of the way they felt towards Judith and Tim? Is it Tim? Your other brother, Tim, yeah.
So interestingly, that information is new to me, that they gave you less money. So there were some things I knew, and there's some things I had no clue about. I had no idea that mom was changing the money to make it even. It's only because my mom would tell the story, and I probably felt it in the moment, but my Nana would give me a Barbie doll, and she would give Judith a rag doll. And I'm in no way taking away from how horrible that is. But I heard it a lot of times, and I felt very guilty, because it's like, ugh, that's awful. Like, it was just, and that's no way to take away from what you went through, Judith, but that if you're asking about the effect on the non-adopted child, that was definitely a bit of shame and guilt for sure at being favored, right?
Yeah.
Because it's nothing you asked for, nothing you made happen. And as a child, you also don't want to give it up, right?
Yeah, because you like your Barbie doll.
I like that. I like, and to be honest, in a family of 5 children, the more children you have, the less attention and time there is to go around. So if I was going to get any kind of focus, kind of unconditional love and attention from a particular mentor or grandparent type figure, I was going to grab whatever I could, right? So as a child does. So I very much feel for you, Judith, in those stories. And I wish things had happened more openly. I don't remember anything obvious happening when I was present and older, because I feel like I wish I'd had more opportunity to be like, whoa, excuse me, what are you doing? And there were times and different situations where I had spoken to that set of grandparents at certain things and said, I would stand up to them. I felt secure enough in my relationship that I would say things, but unfortunately never on this topic. It never. Do you remember times when we were older, Judith, that it was happening in front of me, that like late teens or anything like that? Because I feel like I wouldn't have stood up before then.
I wouldn't say, in my recollection, I don't have anything that like outshines at moments when I was older. Well, I know there were racist comments that were said, definitely, in front of us, at different times, comments about other races as well,
Right.
So there was definitely, there was covert and overt racism, right? There were microaggressive, no, it's okay.
Right.
There were microaggressive statements made, right? But all to recall everything, no, but I remember those being said. And I think at times we weren't really empowered to necessarily stand up fulsomely as we needed to, right?
For sure.
So that's also part of the challenge that we had.
As a child too, like no matter what race you are, like it sounds like there were more microaggressions than I was ever aware of, because as a child, hearing someone say something like that for the first time, you go, oh, okay, maybe that's the way it is. That's what that person thinks, who's older than me, who I love, who I listen to. I'm supposed to listen to them and obey them, right? And so that's where you just take it in very unknowingly.
Absolutely. And because you don't know any better.
Exactly.
And that's, you're growing and learning from your parents, and that's all you can do. But having said that now, knowing what was happening there, was there ever a time in your family that you decided to celebrate their heritage in any way? Can you both think of anything like that in any way at all?
There wasn't really, no, there wasn't. And the short answer is no. My parents had never been to Haiti before. This was the late 70s, early 80s. And during that time, you didn't have to travel to the country of your child's origin. Now, of course, we know you do, and that's definitely best practice. I'm so glad that's changed. But because they've never been there themselves, they didn't have much insight or information to give us. I don't remember meeting any Haitian people when we were young. We had some Black friends, but no actual Haitian people. I started meeting Haitian people on my own when I was in university. And I was very excited because there was a real lack of that, that we had growing up. We had some friends from the Caribbean, the continent, and, the first time I would have probably tasted Caribbean food. Kathy, you remember when that gentleman lived with us? And he cooked us pig's tails and rice and peas.
He's from
and
Jamaica.
Let me tell you, he's Jamaican. And while we have not exactly the same foods in Haiti, there's a lot of crossover, of course, as we know, right, from the continent to the Caribbean, etc. And I tell you, I was so excited. It was flavorful, it was delicious, and I was just like, can I have some more? Like, I ate that food, and I was probably about 9 or 10 then, and I was just so excited to get Caribbean food. But my mom, we didn't have that a lot.
But it's interesting because it sounds to me like you weren't familiar with it. You were taking as a baby. So it would be something that is a taste that, like a race memory, or carried through in your DNA, because you wouldn't have tasted it before then. And it's interesting how you took to it straight away. That's quite remarkable, So Katherine, yourself, working with a sister like Judith, did you come across any microaggression as well? Did you find people excluding you from things because you had a Black sister? Can you remember anything like that?
If they did, I wasn't aware of it. People were excluding me because I was neurodivergent and therefore a little bit weird, and I had a lot of trouble making friends and finding good friends, and maybe that was part of it, but it was never vocal as to why. I know that's also a very much a condition of the type of person I am,
Judith, were you aware of your sister's condition?
No, not at all.
When you were growing up, you were not aware of it?
Until I was
40. She wasn't diagnosed until she was an adult. So for us growing up, we were always kind of, I think our family as a whole, like people knew the Craig family because we were very visible. We had 2 Black children, 3 white children, and my mom was sort of what you would say nowadays is like hip and cool to be into like natural foods and whole healthy eating. She was that way in the 80s. And like we wore Birkenstocks and
before it was cool.
Way before it was cool.
Before it was cool. Way.
Yeah.
But okay, I have to take some of the blame for why she was like that, though. I have to give her credit because of my allergies. She went overboard when there was no internet. There was nothing you could look up online. She was reading books. We had, we'd come home from school. We were running chips or a snack after school. We opened the cupboard and you got beans and flax seeds. And it's like, But I mean, she was feeding us ground up flax seeds before anyone knew that was good for heart health. Only a few obscure books that she had found had told her that. And so that was a big part of who my mom was. When she takes something on, she's very dedicated to it and she gives it 1,000%. And so she went into 1,000% to try and heal me because I was covered in eczema from 6 months old.
Wow.
So sorry, Judith, I didn't mean to hijack your story.
No. It's that. I mean, that's such a good example, right? Setting of that. So we were kind of known as this like unique family anyway. But I think that's a nice way of saying it. But I think growing up, like when we moved from the States to Toronto, our neighborhood was very multicultural. I had my first Black best friend down the street, Lee, who was just amazing. So her mom was a Black American woman. And so that was a time where the neighborhood, we would play in the alleyway and we had more diversity around us. So I think in terms of that aspect of it, it was more comfortable, certainly for me. And then for a younger brother when he joined too, because it wasn't just, I was the only Black of the village essentially, right? Like we had in the States. So I'm very glad that we moved. I know my parents were intentional about us coming back to Canada, partially because of that issue. So I think that in terms of friends and stuff, I think overall we played pretty well with the neighborhood kids. People would always stop and ask us questions. Once they heard the story, often they would move on. But anytime we went somewhere new, it'd be like,
all over again. Yeah.
All over again. So we did get it a lot.
Yeah. But did you find it annoying, Katherine? Judith would have found it frustrating.
You wanted people to understand, like, it's not a big deal. Like, no, this is the way it is and it's fine, and to be honest, I feel like there's a real benefit. It kind of comes out in different ways, but there's a real benefit that I had growing up and that I even saw my children have having a Black aunt and a Black uncle. And that is just, you know, for people who grew up in a completely white community or a completely Black community or any community that is not diverse, there's this otherness and this have interactions with people who are of a different race. And so to us, it was just so bloody normal. It was what it is. And even now, so, and I see that very much in my oldest child and my younger daughter. And even to the point now where Judith's Black friend, her mom was from the States, and she was just like, child, you know, like the way that she would talk to me, I was just so fond of her, and the way that she interacted with us. She was a real mama, you know, like she was very community minded, and there was something I think in there that came from Black culture. And so even now, like I will meet somebody who's a person of color, and immediately I feel like on some small level I have a familiarity with you. I feel fine to talk to you, and they're kind of like okay, you know, and it's a little bit of skepticism, it's a little bit of distrust, because they don't know, where's this woman coming from? And I'm just like, what, you know? And I, you know, even I had, and it's not extremely diverse where I live now, it's definitely changed a lot in the last decade, but I had a friend who was Black, and we went to her birthday, and she said, just a few people coming over. And I get there, and it's like the entire Black population of this town is in her home. Oldest child went upstairs with the girls, and they were talking and laughing. And the girls said to my oldest child, like, wow, we didn't expect you to be so cool with us. Like, to really, you kind of get us, you know? And I thought, well, I know exactly why, you know? So I see that as a blessing. That, I mean, there was never any question. We see people as people. Obviously, culture is important, and heritage is important, and all those things. But to me, there's no barrier there. If you're human, then I can relate to you, you know? And so I really appreciate that part of it. And I appreciate that my kids got the benefit of that too.
So Katherine, for instance, if you ended up with a Black child in that position that your mother was in, what would you do differently today? In other words, hearing what Judo is saying, a lot of the things that you would have gone through, you would never experience because you're not walking in her skin. So you would not even touch it. It won't come near you. And unfortunately, you may not observe it either because you're walking your path, she's walking her path. And that's the difficulty there, because sometimes you would go through a particular experience and think, why haven't they seen it? It's because they're walking their path, and their path is their norm. Your path is your norm. So a lot of the time, what is your norm will not register with them because it's your unique experience. The question I'm asking is, have you had any thoughts about what you would have done differently that would have helped ameliorate the kind of challenges that Judith would have experienced, especially with racism?
You can kind of go at it from two ways. First of all, we were intending to adopt a child from Haiti. That's what I wanted to do my whole life. And there were many different circumstances. We had a lot of challenges. We had financial challenges and things going on. So that really stopped us from being able to adopt for a long time, like probably 15, 20 years, right? And in that time, Judith was discovering herself. We were having lots of conversations. She made a documentary. All of this stuff was going on. And I think that I began to see it a little differently, in the sense that why add this extra layer? If there is a white child, like, to me, I would have obviously no problem, a child of any race, they need a home and we're available, let's do it. I mean, and sometimes that is the best case scenario. In rare cases, it's better than what could have happened, right? But I think if you have a choice, if you're looking at it and going, okay, well, we're just going to be adding this other layer. I don't know if this is the right phrase, racial disparity, but just that people are going to be commenting, noticing, it's going to be in their face. And Judith helped me to kind of understand that. And that was not the only reason, but one of the reasons why we chose to adopt from our home province. I think it's really difficult. It's a really difficult situation, and there has to be so much. Adoption itself is, I don't want to say difficult, but it is a challenging journey. It has beautiful challenges. It has really hard challenges, and they are all worth it. But it's not the easy path per se. If you were choosing the easiest way to parent, you wouldn't choose adoption. And that's not putting anything on the adoptees themselves. I mean, none of this is their fault, right? They're coming as they are, and you love them as they are. But you have to have a special set of skills to do that. And at this point, I just don't think I would do it.
Catherine, I've got to tell you that I just admire your honesty. I
Thank you.
respect and totally admire your honesty. And I think this honesty is so refreshing because it's truthful. And it's also because it's sensitive, because you're sensitive to the issues. You recognize that with the best will in the world, we're living in a world that doesn't recognize that people of different colors and races can live together and not let the color be an issue. And as long as the world exists like that, a transracial placement will always have its issues and leave discomfort with the poor child there. Because while they're asking the questions of why is she your sister? You are empowered to defend. She disempowered. She cannot defend herself. So the child grows up in a family where they're constantly empowered by the interruptions from people outside. And therefore, to get to a stage in your life where you have to pick yourself up and find some strength somewhere to empower yourself, it might be quite an undertaking. And I respect the fact that you recognize it. And it's also to say that, and again, one of the questions I was going to ask, and I thought there's no point in asking because you wouldn't be able to answer, is how would your mother have helped your Judith to navigate the challenges of racism when she herself would not know what racism is? Because you only ever absolutely understand racism when you have walked in the skin of a Black person and experienced it. And then you'd know how to deal with it. Because, you might either go at it aggressively and angrily, or you might go at it sensitively. But you need to have walked in that shoe to know when to use which.
I think that most definitely, I don't want to speak for her. Most definitely, I know that my mother couldn't fully understand it because she hadn't lived it. But I do believe that she grew up around a lot of it. She grew up somehow as a child, as a teenager, she saw it. And I do want to give her credit for that because she was growing up in a culture that was, it was very normal to be very racist. And I'm not even talking about microaggressions,
Okay.
and even the little comments she would sometimes explain to us, or explain to me anyway. Well, that's what this person means when they say. And so I do give her credit that I think that she was being very intentional in adopting. She wanted to help.
That's what I was thinking. As you're saying, I thought she wanted to help. She thought maybe I can make a difference.
Exactly. And that was the bottom line, I believe.
And all credit to her. And I think that sometimes these are moments where I'm not saying that we throw our hands in the air, but what I'm saying is that it's actually a bigger problem than one individual can resolve because you're looking at the whole world and their perception. So it's you fighting a world that is so powerful and so strong that whatever you do, it'll work to some extent, but it just wouldn't cut it completely. But you know what? Judith is where she is today. She's still standing. Many of them crumbled along the line. So you all did something. And one of the things you must recognize is you can only do so much in those situations. Some people never stood up on their feet ever again. And she's standing.
Absolutely.
And talking more now than you did.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that our parents, specifically our mother, because she was a stay-at-home mother, was aware of overt racism, right? On the big scale.
Yeah.
So when I was called the N-word in kindergarten, she and this Auntie Jean raced down to the school and dealt with it.
Yeah.
So I saw those examples and those things were positive. However, I would be remiss if I didn't mention there was a lot of more covert behavior did go on by all of my family, right?
Yeah.
And Katherine and I have had these conversations. For example, and I was just talking about this with our mother actually the other day, because I have Black children and I'm still in a position where I'm still educating, right? And that's frustrating at times, for sure. But when Katherine and I and our younger sister would go shopping, for example, right? We'd be in a store, we'd split up. I'd go my way. we all would disperse in the store. And we'd leave the store. And I'd be like, oh my God, you guys, didn't you see that security guard was following us around in the store? And they would literally be like, no, what are you talking about?
That's what I said when I said you're walking your path and they're walking their path.
Exactly.
But I did not know it was because she was Black.
Yeah.
Exactly. If I couldn't bring those challenges to my family, right? Therein lies the exact challenges. Who then did I take it to? It wasn't until I got older and I hung around and I had more Black friends and we would go out and we'd have that shared horrible experience, right? Of prejudice and racism. We would all sit around and be like, yes, okay, you saw it, you experienced it. And I finally felt my voice.
It's like you're being gaslit.
So I was I was gaslit and I was silenced a lot more than the family realized, and how harmful and how damaging that was for me. And I've had to go on my healing journey around that. And during my healing journey, it's also been about sharing that with them so they're aware of it. And some family members have taken that better than others. You know, Katherine's been one who's, I would offer honestly, not just because she's on the show, but she's open to learning and hearing, you know, and she'll say, God, I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't even realize it was happening. So for me, the challenge with interracial adoption is just that. And people can minimize that all they want, but the reality is, for a Black child to grow up in that family, if they'd never come to a place, if like I'd never come to a place of understanding that on a bigger level, I would be at a very different place today. And I see that in the folks that I work with. So it's not best for everybody. And people often use that trope, but people don't think about the many complexities that happen with interracial adoption. And they need to, because a lot of damage is being done to Black and racialized children.
They are. And then, Judith, the point about this is a point that you both mentioned, both Katherine and you said. And that when I said you're walking your path and she's walking her path, the example you gave illustrates that perfectly. Because, you know, you would not know what Judith is going through. You would not even notice that the security guy is following her around the shop. Because you're busy shopping, you're looking at your clothes and your cosmetics and your whatever it is. You know, you're not following, your eyes are beady eyes following what Judith do. No, you know, so you wouldn't notice it. Judith would feel that tension. And the thing is, every time it happens, it disempowers you more and more. But I think also the other thing that is so important is being able to share with other people who have the same experience as you, for you to know that it's not you who's paranoid, but there are others going through the same experience. And then suddenly it normalizes it. I'm not saying that racism is okay, but it just means that you're not alone in that experience. And it's through you, Judith, that I discovered this thing about something that I'm going to talk about it now. It's not relevant to this particular topic, but you know, it's the first time I realized that human beings do not want to be in an experience where they are isolated in it. You know when that was, Judith? When you went in search of your birth mother, and you went to Haiti, you found those 3 women who came forward, and the DNA didn't match you. And I said, were you disappointed? You said, not really. And I thought, why would you be disappointed? Because you were really wanting to. And you said it's because you're so happy that you are not alone in that experience. You know, I thought, wow, that was obviously such an overwhelming feeling that it even completely obliterated the fact that none of them were their mother, because the feeling of not wanting to be isolated and being a foundling was empowering for you.
I'm just curious, did you mean because there were mothers who had lost their children and you were a child who had been lost, so to speak? Is that what you meant by not being alone?
What she meant was the fact that she wasn't a foundling. She was not the only person who had been left in a ditch as a foundling. Okay. It was so important for me because for the first time I thought, wow, it is an important feeling for every human being, which when you've led a very normal life, you would completely elude you. I would never have thought that there's anything in this life like that, and therefore it's very prominent in your whole outlook of life. And that's why that was so important for you. And I remember thinking to myself, imagine all these years of this life, and I learned this at this age, you know? And it's a very fundamental lesson. And I think that when we all remember that no human being wants to be in a situation where they are isolated in their experience, it'll help us to start thinking more broadly. What can we do to ensure that whatever we're putting them through, they're not isolated in it?
Well, I think that's why, too, what we see and what we know is that, especially for adopted people, it's so important for them to know other adopted people. Right? I didn't really have that growing up. We didn't really know anybody who was adopted. As I got older, it became such an important part of my experience and my journey. So when I actually lived in the UK and I connected with other adoptees, specifically other transracial adoptees, it was like a homecoming in a sense, because we were able to speak on things in the same way. There were times we didn't even have to say a full sentence. We just had certain understanding because we had lived a very similar path in a lot of ways, acknowledging there were differences in everybody's story. But that was so significant. And, you know, now when we see adopted children, there's camps that adopted families can go to and spaces they can come together in. And I've been able to speak and be a presenter at some of those experiences. And it's sort of like, whoa, because you realize how rampant it is. There's another part of it that's so lovely, that children are growing up in this day and age more aware of it. We're talking about adoption more. We're educating ourselves more. adoptive parents are being educated in a more fulsome way, right? And the awareness is around having your children connect with other adoptive people and parents connecting with other adoptive parents. It's absolutely critical, right?
It is critical.
It goes back to the point you're saying, right, about me feeling connected to these mothers in a very unique way. It was horrible. I mean, it was desperately sad, don't get me wrong, to know there were so many disconnected families out there, right? And seeing these families who came forward desperately to find their children who had been foundlings or relinquished and they never knew what happened to them. It was horrific, but there was a sort of this sense of togetherness because I thought, they know what I've gone through as a foundling who has no trace, right? Whereas other adopted people, as I'd started to meet them, they had records, they had information, they had pictures. You know, our own brother who was adopted had names and pictures, a whole album, which as a child I was extremely envious of because I didn't have that, right? So there's something about that togetherness and that connectivity that helped in my healing journey, I would offer.
You know, and I suppose the other thing that we talked about is the layers. To try to eliminate as many layers as possible in that child's life when you adopt them. That's what Katherine was talking about, which is why she said, I would not do it because a layer one of race is too big. You can't hide it, even if you wanted to. And the thing is, while you, the parent, will not be impacted by it necessarily, the child is grossly impacted by it. And I think that's the challenge, you know. So let me ask this to both of you. Katherine, what advice would you give to somebody who is going to adopt a Black child and is hell-bent on doing it? What advice would you give them? What guidance, just to open their understanding, to help them to understand how deliberate they had to be?
So it hasn't happened yet?
Hasn't happened yet. They're determined to do it. So
determined to do it. Okay. So I think that's exactly where I wanted to comment. Another layer that kind of made me think about it is that it's very important to take a moment and reflect on what are your motivations. I know for myself, and I'm positive that my parents experienced this as well, but myself being very much like my mom, being very emotional person, empathic, have a lot of compassion when I see someone in need. And we were brought up in predominantly white churches with the missionary Sunday, showing the videos 9 times out of 10. Sorry, is this too triggering?
No, go for it. This is good.
9 times out of
right?
I just see the head shake. I'm like, oh.
Yep.
9 times out of 10, this video is going to have a Black child with the belly distended, the flies on their faces, or maybe Hispanic or Asian. But usually I remember Black children. It was like children are starving in Africa. That was always something that, you know, well, you're not going to finish your food. Children are starving in Africa. I don't think my parents said that, but I know it's a thing that white people say to their kids, right? And so my point is that you're sitting there going, oh, this is awful. I want to do something. I want to help. And, you know, there are some people who have lots of money and who are willing to give lots of money, and that's great. There are some people who don't have lots of money, but they're thinking, well, I love kids and I work hard at being a good parent and I could give in this way. And that's 100% where my brain was. You know, when I watched the Haitian, we were almost at the point of adopting locally in, was it 2011, Jude, with the Haitian earthquake?
2010, yeah.
And I thought, you know what, I need to watch this. Even though I don't watch the news, it's too upsetting. I will watch this documentary. My God, I was a mess. Because I have this personal connection to it, as well as already feeling so much empathy for the people who were, what they were going through. And we stopped for several reasons. One, I said, I think we need a bigger home. Our kids are growing. You know, we don't have the room. But 2, I really want to go to, I'm sorry, I'm on a tangent. My point is that I think you have to ask your motivation and ask yourself, you know, why is it important for me to adopt a Black child? What is the reason? Is it because I've been sitting in church or always seeing these images of these poor, destitute Black children? And it's like, is this really the answer? I know that there are other ways to help and other ways to help country. And I'm not an expert on this, but I know that it would be better for the people of that country to be empowered to help themselves. I know that, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess it's just, my dad used to always say something very interesting. He said, you know, before the internet, we didn't know that there was a war going on in that country and there was a famine going on in that country. But we knew that so-and-so lost their child 2 streets down and we could go and we could help out there, you know. And in some ways there are benefits to the world becoming smaller and there are detriments to it because we are overwhelmed sometimes, I think, by the amount of pain and suffering that we see, and we want to do something, but sometimes maybe we don't understand where our motivation is coming from, or maybe we haven't researched to know what is the best way to help. Or maybe I need to go help the child in my community who also needs adoption, and yet we want diversity. So they're very complicated questions. I think that the number one thing is you need to ask yourself, what is my motivation? Why am I fixated on doing it this way when I could do it that? And is this what's best for the child? Is it going to help them or hurt them? And then, I mean, if you end up doing it, you better be prepared, because there are a lot of extra things that you need to do, as far as making sure that your family has Black friends, making sure that your family has Black friends, ideally from that culture, ideally going to that country once, if not many times. I mean, can you afford this? You know, celebrating the celebrations. I don't know all the celebrations of Haiti, but I know that I don't believe it was like a Christian country, and my parents were very, very Christian. So if there was celebrations, I don't know if my parents would have been comfortable doing those celebrations. Maybe that's part of the reason. I don't know. So
you hit on a very important point. And I always say this, that when you are ready, if you decide you want to do that, you have to be ready to bring the entire village and culture and country of that person into your home and live it. Not let them live it in isolation, live it with them, if you're ready to do it. And the only thing that you will not ever be able to do is to walk in their skin. And that still leaves you with a deficit, because you'll never fully empathize with all the experiences that they're going through, in spite of everything you put there. And, you know, and I can say this because I adopted children who are the same race as me. And in their case, nobody ever asked them whether they were adopted. In fact, it was the opposite. Yeah. When they told people that they were adopted, so come on, that's stupid. What a stupid thing to say. And they'd say, what do you mean by stupid? We are adopted. Then they'll come and ask me. And they used to love doing that, because they love the fact that people would doubt the fact that
shock
they were adopted.
value.
So, yeah, they loved it. And they used to play on it a lot. But even still, there are challenges, you know. And so, you know, and I'm thinking, if you had the extra layer, but, you know, thank you to Katherine for your honesty in this interview. I respect it so much. And I can't thank you enough for sharing your honesty, your truth with us. Judith, what about you? I mean, obviously you are in this world, and I want to say that if you see somebody who is going to adopt a Black child, what will you say to them?
So many. That's always a tricky one, is where do I...
What did you say to me 10 years ago?
What did I say? Well, I said, stop and think about it. Yeah, I said, whoa. One, because you're right. 10 years ago, your community was not very diverse at all, right? So much so that when I used to go up and visit my sister, because she's about 5 hours north of Toronto, I would be like, where's the Black people at? And I remember we had this conversation a few times, because I was like, I just counted 5 Black people today when we were downtown. And you know, Katherine would be offended. She was like, well, you know, and I think it was, you know, she didn't, it was her husband's job that led them there and all the rest of it. Yeah. So, but because she grew up in the GTA, Greater Toronto area, for those who aren't familiar, and it was much more diverse. So even for her going up there, it was like, oh, okay. But when I would raise it at times, you know, it's prickly because we're sensitive people. All of us are allowed to be sensitive about things. But I was actually stating it because this is how uncomfortable I am as a young adult coming here, right? So again, imagine 2 little more Black children coming into this community and having very few examples of themselves. And I grew up in a, you know, in our later years, in a much more diverse area, but it wasn't enough. It still wasn't enough. The other really big thing that I say to folks is, have you done your own work, right? Inherently, we all can have prejudices, right? For some folks, we can have straight out racist viewpoint perspectives, right? I'm not here saying all white people are racist, please hear me, but there are going to be prejudice. There are going to be things that as a white woman, as my sister has shared today, she didn't see as we were coming up, as we were growing, right? Because she's not living it. So right there and then, you have to pump the brakes and say, have I done my own work to dig out all of those microaggressions, all of those prejudices, all of those racism, all of those myths that I've believed over the years? Have I worked those through? Have I read the books? White Fragility as one example. Have I dug in enough, although that book in itself is not the only book to read, but have I done this work fulsomely so that when my Black or racialized child comes to me and says, I'm experiencing microaggressive behavior at school, huge mindful for it, right? Or in this place or in this environment, that you as a parent will not shut them down and say, you're being sensitive, or don't play the race card. That you as a parent will say, oh my God, I'm going to scoop up my child, hold them, go to battle for them, and also teach them what they need to know to go to battle for themselves. As a parent sitting here of Black children, we live also in not the most racially diverse area. It's becoming more so even the last couple of years where I live. I'm now outside of the Greater Toronto area. We have had multiple examples this school year where my partner and I have had to go down to that school or get on the phone to combat racism and microaggressive behavior from students, from teachers, etc., from staff. We've done it, and we have no qualms at all of doing it. But on that journey, we're also teaching and modeling for our children how to do it. So much so that our 13-year-old is a bit of a reputation for standing up for people, and I'm so proud of her. She will stand up in the face of any prejudice and racism, and she will call it out, and she will call attention to it. And it became so essential, we actually invoked the school to bring in and to have workshops on microaggressive behavior, because what's happening to her and to other students, and she stood up and she wasn't silent. So that's what I'm talking about, is parents have to be able to be on that level. I'm not claiming to be a perfect parent, but what I do know for sure is my children are going to be well equipped as they walk in this world, because the first thing that people see of my children is their Black skin. And if they're not ready to handle that, then I have failed as a parent. And no child should have to walk in the world unequipped, because it's not fair on them. It's just not.
But not only that, I think the other thing is about the fact that if they're not equipped to do it, they walk through this world in complete denial.
Exactly.
They deny everything. They'll tell you, oh no, I don't experience racism. Oh no, everything is cool with me. No, I haven't got a problem. No, I'm cool. And the minute a person starts coming out with statements like that, you know that they're just on the brink of a breakdown, or brink of something, because they just cannot deal with it. They can't, because it's taken over their life so completely they wouldn't know where to begin.
Yeah.
And it's so important that the child realizes that I am Black, I am experiencing racism, I may not know how to deal with it, but it's important that you recognize it. Because as soon as you recognize it, that's how a problem solved. Then you're going to start looking for solutions. So the problem is when you come across those people who don't say it, I kind of stand back and I think, oh, that's painful.
Yeah, it really is.
If I can walk in the gray area for just a moment.
Yeah.
I completely affirm what you're saying with Judith and what you're saying, Sally, and I stand behind you on that. But like I say, there's always a gray area. There's always two sides to every coin. And when I look at our lives, I'm so grateful that you're my sister, right? And as difficult as it was, and as hard as it was, you know, we wouldn't have this bond. We wouldn't have this history where it's no matter what your upbringing is like, there's positive, there's negative, but we did it together and we have that history together. And that, to me, I really cherish that. And so to me, that is a positive. But I even taking it one step deeper and looking at it as, you know, you see in movies sometimes, I think adoption is a beautiful thing, no matter what, no matter who, no matter when. And even if it's like, you can see in some stories and movies how even if it's unofficial, where the most unlikely pair of people come together and one's seeking a parental figure and one is desperate to have a child's love, and they end up finding each other. And maybe they look completely different. Maybe they're from completely different cultures. And there is beauty in that. There is beauty in that they found each other and they were able to fill that need and love each other on their journey. I think that the reason we see so much beauty in that is because for so long, things were so, and I mean, in many places they still are, so segregated. You would never even see a Black person in that church or in that store or in that whatever. Never mind accepting them into your family. And so when you look at it from, okay, if we're coming from there, that is pretty beautiful because they are being accepted, they are being loved, and they are finding each other as people, as humans in this world. But there is a beautiful side to it. But I think what we're talking about is taking it another step further for this next generation to say, okay, however, there are ways that we can do this better, right? Because it does have it, like, hello, there is a big effect here. There is a big detriment here. Maybe not so palatable side of the coin, really.
I think, you know, with every story, as you said, there's always a nice side to it and there's a positive. You can choose to focus only on the positive side and
True.
deny the negative.
True.
And the point, I think, that when you're looking at actors and stories, they've chosen to focus only on the positive side and present that because that's palatable. But
Very
if you
true.
get into that story, you're going to find the same issues are there. They cover it up. Somebody's suffering in silence, or somebody's going through denial and deciding, well, let's decide that we want to show to the world.
That's a very good point. I guess I just feel like it was a step away from that type, the initial overt racist culture that was very much the norm. And I feel like, okay, it's very much time to take the next step. But that's why people saw it as, well, what's wrong with this? Because isn't it a good thing, right? But it's like, but reality, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think that we have to be very careful, right? Because essentially what you're saying is to have that altruistic life of people coming together and connecting, right? That there's often a person who's on a very more than just challenge, right? A lot of harm is actually being done to a lot of folks, and a lot of trauma happens, right, in these circumstances. So I think opposed to just saying it's, and I appreciate what you're saying. Of course, I'm happy you're my sister as well. And we have the shared experience, and we've had, we have a lot of love and everything for each other. I think that it's important to also really connect to the fact that, there was a movie years ago that came out that said love is not enough, right? And it was quite like, but it explained a lot, is that it's not enough, right, on its own. And love is important. Everybody needs and deserves and requires that. But there has to be so much more poured into that. And especially when you're talking about adoption in general, I think, unfortunately, I would say adoption isn't a good thing. In the ideal world, there would be no adoption, right? And some people think like, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is very simple. In an ideal world, there wouldn't be a need for adoption, right? If we're really thinking ultra, right, is there should be no need for adoption.
But we'll never be in an ideal world.
Right, but going off what you're saying of that, we can look at it from this perspective. Ideally, there should never have to be it, because it comes with so much loss and so much deep grief for all parties, right? And that, because we are where we are, yes, we know what happens. So just taking a step back and looking at it from that slightly different angle is really important as well, because that also allows us to connect to that grief and that loss that so often is minimized through the adoption journey. So it's just about keeping the balance, right?
It is. And also, even though you said, and I think what Katherine said is the point, that we're not in an ideal world. And the way I look at it is this. And while I hear what you're saying, in an ideal world, it wouldn't happen. I say this, that somewhere God has created women who cannot have children. And somewhere else, there are children who need parents who haven't got parents. And you and I know that a baby in this world needs somebody to mother it. It cannot mother itself. And therefore, that child has to be with an adult, a woman, ideally, who would bring it up. So for me, this is where I am on this matter. That yes, in ideal world, whatever it is, but I feel that in my ideal world, if adoption is the way that we have to go, let us learn from the mistakes that have happened and work towards getting it right. Getting it right becomes our journey. That is our goal, all of us. Learning from what's happening around us, what's wrong, what isn't working, what is working, what can we bring in, what can we eliminate. Because when I adopted my children, I just brought them up the way that I was brought up. Because I had a very good upbringing, and I had a family that was nothing but love and enjoyment. We just had fun. So I just brought up my kids like that. And they, fortunately, fell into a role like that. But then you see, even then, as they got older, I began to realize that it was not enough. The love that I was given them was not enough, because guess what? Apart from the fact that they were in the same race placement, they enjoyed themselves, you know what? Their losses, you can't take that away from them. You cannot take, and no matter what happens, there would be an anger in them, if nothing else, about that loss, which I was completely oblivious for. And us, adoptive parents, our position in life is this. Well, that child needed a parent, and I've given the child a parent. Surely the child should be happy that they now have a mother. So what's the big deal? What is the big deal? We do not even begin to recognize that there is a loss there, because we're feeling that because we stepped in as a mother, that would have actually eliminated
Yes.
that loss.
Yeah.
And I'm beginning now to recognize that apparently not.
Yeah.
Apparently not. We will step in as a mother, we will play a role as a mother, but that fundamental loss will always be with that child, and the child will always yearn for that mother. And guess what? It is actually much, much more than meets the eye. It's much more than a visual thing. It's deeper than that. And it's something that you and I would never understand.
I completely agree with you. And that is very much due to conversations with Judith and books that she had me read, that I would read one chapter and break down for an hour and then have to come back to it, read another chapter, break down. We have to question ourselves. We have to grow continually. That's part of being human. It's how we should be as humans, right? But I think as a mother, you come into motherhood. I mean, let's say it's biological, and it is so blinking hard to be a mom. It's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful and it's beautiful, and you would never give it away for the world. But it is the hardest thing you will ever do in your life. Then next step, you choose adoption, or maybe it was chosen for you because of life and circumstance, and now you're on another mothering path that is equally as difficult, sometimes more difficult. And you're going, oh my God, I've given you everything. I have nothing left some days, right? And so it's hurtful for an adoptive child to hear or have it implied that you should be grateful. That is not something that should be said. But at the same time, just to understand both perspectives, I think sometimes mothers are just so blinking tired. And so I've given you everything. What do you mean you wish it wasn't this way, or I waited so long for you and I've loved you with everything in my being. How is it not enough? And I think it's more of a disbelief on our part to say, how could this possibly not be enough? Because I literally have nothing left to give you. I've given you all my all. But the child, I mean, through no fault of their own, is going, no, there are other issues here. There are other completely different issues here that many adoptive mothers don't know and really need to explore before taking that step.
And I think that this belief comes from the fact that we are convinced that stepping in as a mother for that child should obliterate any feeling of loss of the original parent. And unfortunately, to my horror, that was not the case. And you see a lot of people go into adoption saying, look, I want to go and adopt an orphan. And that's the mindset behind it. I don't ever have to worry about a mother. The loss will still be there. And in fact, it's better that the person even knows that there's a mother that they can meet. It's actually better, And I brought up my children totally, the idea of them having had a loss, and I'm going to tell you the truth, never entered my mind. So I did not bring up my children factoring into the whole thing that they had a loss of their birth mother. To me, I was giving them everything they didn't have, a family, loving family, the funds, the connections, all, not recognizing at all that loss was so fundamental in their lives. It was ready to shake their world upside down when I least expected it. And that has been a wake-up call for me. And of course, because I was never prepared for it, I just had no idea how to deal with it. And again, the other thing that I keep talking about the layers, that's an unfortunate situation that every adoptive parent is going to have to deal with at some point in their life, inevitably. And then you have the added layers of race and whatever else there is out there. So I'm thinking all of us should be kind to ourselves. Let us limit the layers, limit it, make it as little as possible. So it's going to be big enough, it's going to be difficult enough. Let's deal with one, not 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right. Now I have a question to stir the pot. So a white family adopting a black child and all the things we've discussed about that, would you feel the same if it was flipped? Black adopting a white child?
Yeah, I had the opportunity. I had the opportunity, not a white child. When I was going to adopt my children, I had the opportunity to adopt a mixed heritage child. And I said no. And I said no deliberately. And I know that it offended a couple of other people. It offended my children's sibling because she was adopted by a white family. She was so angry with me because I said that. And I said to her, it's because I don't properly reflect that child's heritage and her background. It's going to make her stand out. I did it not because of me. I did for the child. I need to reduce the layers for that child. I'm big enough. I've got broad enough shoulders. But the child is going to go into a world on their own. I won't be there to protect them all the time. And I won't be there to advocate for them all the time. And I've got to prepare them for a world where they can stand on their own 2 feet with confidence. If it's a mixed heritage child, and I'm a black mother sitting there and don't have a white husband, how can I do that effectively? And give her the confidence for her to step out into the world and walk in her own skin and be comfortable.
changed at all when you consider perhaps the community that they're living in, or the white privilege that child will experience? Does that change things at all?
Well, I think also, but the interesting thing is that it's a funny thing that I'm going to say, and you're both going to jump at me. And I'll say that if a black person adopted a white child, the white child's layer is a lot less. It's a lot less. The damage is a lot less. They're not going to experience the level of aggression that the black child experienced. They're living in a world which has everything that is normal is based on whiteness. So they'll be living in a world that is white and normal. They'll go into a shop, nobody will follow them. They'll go into school, they'll be accepted. They will not experience racism. Yeah, the only racism they'll experience is overt racism, which is, how come you call your brother? He's my brother. Okay, life goes on. He will never experience negativity with it. Never.
I think, wouldn't that just really depend on where they're living, though? Because if
No,
that child is
it doesn't
in a
matter where
black
they are.
community, if that child is in a black community and they're not accepted by the other children in the neighborhood, yeah, I think it's just maybe, not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying that maybe it would have some effect.
Well, the point that I made, which I think is very important for you to hear, is that the norm is white.
Yeah.
The norm is white.
The norm is white in North America.
Let me put that situation in Ghana. That child would be in Ghana, and they would be with a black family, and people would tease them, but it would never be negative. And people would be curious, but it won't be negative. Here in the West, it's negative, it's nasty, and your life is negatively affected by it. Over there, it will be curiosity and teasing, which is irritating, actually very irritating. You'll actually have children running after you and teasing you like that. It's very annoying, but it's an annoying thing, and you can almost brush it off. And one of the things that actually helps in those situations, if you speak their language, quickly you become one of them. As soon as you speak their language, it breaks the barrier immediately. They suddenly don't see the whiteness anymore. Okay, one of us, let's go, kind of thing. But in the West, it's different because it's insidious.
Yeah, right.
That's the difference. Yeah. There's a different answer. There's a child in an African country, like Ghana, for instance, where I'm from, and for a white child here in England. Because that white child will be disadvantaged to some extent, but not much. Not much in their life is going to change. It's not going to affect their job.
Right.
They'll get a job.
Yeah.
At school, no teacher is going to discriminate against because they're white.
Right.
So all the things that the black child will suffer in school, that white child would never suffer. It's interesting. And it's because of the way the balance of the world is. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah,
It was interesting.
Katherine, it's been a fantastic program. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your being here today and your honesty. And you know what comes through in all of this is the beautiful bond that you, a white girl, and your black sister share. No question about it. And what is beautiful about it is because you are willing to confront difficult issues and confront it openly. That is a mark of a proper bond. And it's admirable that in spite of all the differences, you're still sisters, growing together in your love, learning from each other. You're going from it, she's going from it. And it's wonderful. And I pray that this bond continues because it can only enrich the world. And you know why it will enrich the world, Katherine? From your perspective, because you are growing with such an understanding that you would actually be one of the best trainers to white people who are going to adopt black children. And I want to leave it on that note and say thank you. Katherine, you're a brave woman. Thank you so much. And Judith, you are an amazing child. Thank you for your experiences. Thank you for your honesty in sharing your experiences with us. And the two of you coming on air, telling the world what your family is like. I love it. With honesty and truth. Thank you very much indeed. I want to thank the audience, everybody who's here with us watching this program. I'm sure you have a lot of comments. Share it with us. Tell us if there are questions that you want us to answer. You can see Katherine is here, Judith is here. They will answer it very openly and very honestly. And we all need that so that we can grow from the experience. Judith, thank you. Judith, thank you. Katherine, thank you.
Thank you
Very much. To all adopted people around the world, I dedicate the song Desiderata by Les Crane.
And remember what peace.
It's a powerful, life-changing poem for hard times, which inspires hope for all who hear it. My message to all adoptees is summed up in the chorus. You are a child of the universe. No less than the trees and stars, you have a right to be here. And whether or not it's clear to you, no doubt, the universe is unfolding as it should. and you have a unique and very important part to play in it. So stay strong, positive and focused, and you will thrive. I want to thank you all for joining us at Adoption Dialogue. If you have any questions or comments, send it to us at adoptiondialogue@gmail.com or drop it in the comments section of our social media platforms with the handle Adoption Dialogue without the UE at the end of dialogue. Thank you again. Stay tuned for our next episode on social media. Bye for now and stay blessed.